Table views, another confusing thing in iOS. Let's say that we have some kind of array of data. A bunch of names, for example, and a bunch of profile picture URLs to go with those names, etc., etc. Now, how do we display those somewhere? Well, we could create our own list inside of our iOS project, and we go ahead and count the number of these and create an associated amount of entries. But that would be a bit silly, because what if our array changes? Well, we'd have a problem because we wouldn't have anywhere to show the extra data. So iOS solves this problem very, very neatly. What it does is create a table view, or rather you create it, but you use its functionality. And a table view does pretty much what I've just said. Creates a table full of rows into which we put all of our data. But you can tell the table view that I have, let's say, X amount of data, or I have Y amount of images. And it will go ahead and configure this table view for you so that it provides the correct amount of rows. But not only that, it will also allow you to implement interactivity without any intervention on your part. So as a user, if I go ahead and tap one of the cells, that will fire off a bit of code that says the cell has been tapped. And as the developer, I can write a bit of code that does something with that cell, and that also allows me to access the original data that was provided to the cell, because whenever you tap a cell, you get an index, whatever number cell you've hit. Now, sometimes you can have sections, and that's a slightly more complicated issue, but again, the idea is the same. iOS tells you which section and which row have been tapped. Now, the secret to table views, and the thing that confuses a lot of people, is this idea of cell reuse. Because if we have our table, it costs a lot programmatically to make each one of these cells inside of iOS. And obviously, a mobile device, computing time is at a premium, and you don't want to run down the battery unnecessarily. So iOS has a very special thing where if I scroll, say up or down this list, whenever, let's say, the top cell goes off the screen, so the whole list is kind of scrolling up, that top cell gets taken away and it gets recycled. So instead of destroying it and then making a new one to show down here, what iOS does is it grabs this new one, or this old one rather, and it inserts it at the bottom as a recycled cell. So iOS is environmentally friendly. And in fact, most operating systems do this. Right, now the trick comes, as a developer, in understanding that that is happening. So if you have your recycled cell coming around the loop and dropping into there, be aware that if you've set some kind of button, you've set some kind of text, those will also get recycled. So a lot of people or developers, when they're scrolling up and down in their app, they say, why is my button still switched on? Why is my text the old version? Why does my image show the old one or show in the wrong place? And it's because of this recycling concept. You have to be very careful. So every time you recycle a cell, inside of the particular function that gets your cell, whatever it's called, you need to set the button, set the text, set the image every single time. Unless, of course, it's the same as the recycled cell. But in practice, that would never really happen. So that's how table views work. And I've just explained a major, what we call, gotcha. And a gotcha is something that you spend days wondering about, and then someone like me comes along and says, hey, it's just simply this. and I fix it in 5 minutes, and you need to go for a break and a coffee and maybe a cigarette because the stress has almost killed you. So that's how table views work.